Today I'm joined by Ntsika Tyatya, Culture and Communications Lead at MAXHOSA Africa, where he has spent a decade shaping how the brand tells its story to the world. Welcome.
Thank you, Put.
But that's only a small component of I think who you are. So where I want to start is, what kind of home did you grow up in?
Okay. Sheesh. Nobody's ever asked that. I'd say one, it's between township and village. I think that's the sweet spot in the sense that, just to backtrack from the parents, educators, ambitious in the element of being educators and wanting to study a master's, honors, as things that I've gone to know as I've educated myself. In that sphere, there's children, parents married after myself and my twin were born, but all throughout, 5 children. So in that, they had to go educate themselves, fought hair, and so forth. So the children, by virtue of that, you go to grandparents. So I grew up calling my mother little sister, because that's what her brothers used to call her, right? And dad, for whatever reason. But grew up in Kirkwood, which is far length of Eastern Cape. It's the Orange County farm and farmsteads. And then I think at 8, went to go live with parents because they have got their home, they've got their house. So I think the upbringing has been one of 20 children in a household in a room that sits one room. So the other one's a kitchen, to having a bunk bed sharing with the brothers in a township sense, but it's almost like the township they set up almost as Soweto, where now the teachers and the nurses brought this community before it became within the township. So grew up in Komataki, Gabekhan, formerly known as Port Elizabeth. So it was a township, but people saw it as a black suburb for whatever reasons, because educators, nurses were in that space. They built those homes. So it was also the first phase post-apartheid or pre, where people actually inhabited homes and they had bonds. So that's then the beginning of them, like brick houses. So I always say, between a mud house and a brick house, that's been my education and that's been my background. So spent most of my years until primary, high school, and then summer years now in the village, and then every other year in the township. So one of 5 children, many brothers and sisters and cousins, because parents would take on our cousins, our aunts' children in the house. So I don't know a moment where I was alone, ever in my life.
And you're a twin.
That's the other side of it.
You're one of a larger 2.
Yes, and I think that's the big thing where I always highlight myself as a person who is shy. People are like, that's impossible. You are personable. And I was like, there's a difference between knowing how to speak and knowing how to converse, because I've had that. I grew up with someone I can speak to, so I can relate to people easily. But it doesn't negate the fact that I may not be a person of people. I may not be a person who's around many people or opt for crowds, community, clubs. And that's the dichotomy of the two.
How do you find space alone? Like, how do you find space for yourself within that context? Because like you're saying, like, you've always been around people.
That's it. Sorry, it's not a plug, but it's always near me, because I think then that's what attracted me to writing, because the space alone is within the mind and the brains. And one of the most shocking things that I've realized even about my life is that throughout my entire journey of life, it's always been the journaling of things. And I'm still, I guess, the belief in God, and I'm still not understanding as to how I got to be in certain positions. It baffles me. And I think people always like, oh no, you work hard for it and you do this. That's great. I am a believer that I'm a hard worker, but I love how Steve Stouts talks about the A and the B sides in America, where if you're studying a major, there's a minor. And I think the duality of blackness is that, a duality of human beings. And I think I've been in both these sides. You're twin, you able to speak for long term and you can keep a conversation, but you also don't like being necessarily around people. It's because then me finding my independence tertiary is when I realized, oh, I can be physically alone, because I've never had that. Grew up in a bunk bed, grew up in a floor, in a mud house, then thereafter, suddenly university, you've got your own room, even if you're sharing with a roommate, but own room. And I think that's when the break happened that, oh, I like this. Because you also realize as a child, you don't know what you like because it's shaped under the gaze of another human being. Clothes, tastes, sports. I remember repeating a grade because we have to as twins and finish at the same time. So all those things has been under the gaze of you have to do it because it's what's needed to be done versus what you want to do.
Fascinating. I can't imagine it. Also because I guess like you, I like my space, but I've had the liberty of being able to carve space for myself for as long as I can remember.
Got you.
I have an older sister who's 11 years older than I am, and then my younger siblings, my brother is 5 years younger than I am. So even at family events, I always sat in this weird gray area. So there'd be, the older and the younger. And we'd be at an event and I don't have anybody my age. So I've always been comfortable on my own, and I continue to always kind of carve space for myself.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine kind of decisions being made around, it's not just me.
For the entirety of your life. And I think the one thing that I've learned is that I'm a good B player. And what's happened, and I'll go at length about it, is that being a good B player is knowing how to play for the team, playing your background. And I think that's what people don't see. But when you're thrust in the A lot of times and you now have to be the person to lead and to share and to guide, it becomes daunting because I know how to make this certain thing work. I don't know if I'm able to galvanize people to make the same thing work. So being a B player is being at the back of poetry sessions, traveling from the Eastern Cape to Joburg, to maybe one of your shows, Afrikaans, and never going up, signing my name to perform, and never going up to perform on the basis of, one, maybe I needed to get to a point of understanding what's happening. And you'd go back home, but there's two things that's happening. You go back home, say, if I did, maybe I could have been, to win this prize or be in the Eastern Cape, and I see the Kolekas and you see the element of that. The other side is that maybe also you were meant to be in those rooms so that you can connect for a future that you don't know. When you're connecting in the future with the same people, then it makes sense to have seen, to being in the same room where the soil is performing at Grahamstown Arts Fest, and you're in the same room with these people, right? And I think that's the thing, the resonance of the people that understand who you are in the greater scheme of art has been maybe the reward of me being a B player, to not necessarily be the guy, to know the guy and to maybe work with the guy, work for the guy, but ultimately play a role in shaping things. I think my learnings from being an individual and also being a twin has learned that I can easily extract myself from a situation and allow it to be, versus I can shape narrative. Like, that's my role. If someone can ask, what is my core role with the brand I work with, is to ultimately, they say, communicate culture. And that's a difficult role that people can play with. It's like, yes, you're able to communicate culture to the Western world or to the Eastern world or to South Africa as a whole, but I have to also be a player in the culture. I have to be a cultural person. I have to be esteemed in high spirituality or cultural norms to understand that it's appreciation, maybe not appropriation. So I feel as a communicator, which you may know, is that you have to also be a fly on the wall, where it's difficult to be a fly on the wall with your real life. And then that's the tough side to deal with it. But I've learned to know how to be a fly on the wall, that I can extract something out of a creative, an artist, a designer, and share that with the world. But what if my story is going out of these sharing moments?
One of the things I'd wanted to chat to you about, and it's kind of moot to a certain extent, is you work with a brand, and you work with a person who is at the forefront, and it's been important for him to serve as a face.
Yeah.
And I know also he's also kind of tried to figure out his space and navigating, brand versus me as an individual.
100%.
But it took a while to, for those of us who are looking, or those of us who are watching, to kind of go, oh, wait, but there's that person. And this person is able to do all of that because that person is there. But you also need to operate without ego. It's understanding that you bring something of significant value, but it's not about you.
Correct.
And that was one of the things I'd wanted to ask. But now in your answer, you kind of explained that.
Yeah. And I think to delve into that with the work that we do is one of the key moments, I guess, in my life, and going back to being the B side, and I'll speak on that, is how I got to be the person who's working with the said person, was someone saying, there's someone who does events, or someone that I know going back to the poetry scene. And that's why I would always appreciate the art. So backtrack. In university, studying marketing. And in studying marketing, yes, going back to the element of first time seeing certain things and you living with yourself at res. But in that, I've always found how with the community I would be around with, we would be able to build value and create value. So in that, I'm also campus manager. So now campus managers at all the marketing efforts that coming through Student Village at the time, exposing my age. But it was through the element of, through, the myself. I think my boss at the time would be Nico. I'm working with the now DJ Lloyd, and creating this thing for Student Village to make campus cool. But this is the job that I'm doing, but studying. And the difficulty of that is that, yes, you get paid to bring these activations, but you're also studying this thing, and you're also trying to live real life and be that. And so in that, I had a chat with the parents and said, look, I think for me, I don't know if I want to move forward with the education part of things. And it was a difficult conversation because now you're outside of home and you're building these things. And so the idea now you have to go home.
Where were you studying?
CPUT. This is a pen tech. That's the other element. So going home, and in that, also created a poetry society. So I always say, I found these moments of big reveals, but always being the B-sides. Because in the poetry society, I went for an audition. And in auditioning, at that time, it was slam poetry being the big thing, the Saul Williams. And so everyone's reading, and there I am performing a poem. And someone's like, yo, but this is different. What do you call this? And I was like, it's slam poetry. In that, going back to a copywriting meet, I literally created with the campus. It was the first time they had a slam poetry edition and foundation of it, called literally SLAM, Students, Literature and Arts Movement. It's weird.
Nice.
But created that. And in that's how then I filtered hip hop into campus. So the same time with Student Village, Sprite would share something, and then that's how a proverb would come to campus. Having chats with the Kuli Chanas, with the Tumi at the time, via Bradley, and those big names that you grow up and these are heroes, but you're also working with them as a student, right? And all of that made the life of, I have to sit in campus and the teachers are lecturing and I understand this, but I know that there's this that's happening, difficult. So having that conversation, then it's like, well, you can't sustain your life you can't be a campus manager, not be on campus. So let's go, went home. And in home, I think it was a moment of peace once more, because now the feeling, quote unquote, of failure, or you haven't studied, and I'm going the long way about realizing that I knew what I knew. And, so in that, then I was like, I must start creating events, managing artists at that time. All of this is in the arts, right? So working with managed even a jazz club for whatever reason, multiple lifetimes, multiple things. So in that, I kept on working with this band that I was working with and managing them, but also part of events. So me meeting Ladum was probably 2011, 2012. And it was via a friend on campus, and he was going to London. He always tells this story. And for whatever reason, I just eavesdropped, and he was talking about him being a student going to London for a competition and everything that is meant to be there. And I don't know why. It's like, then I'm like, "Oh, whatever you do, don't sign your life away." And it's like, it's not something he would have done. He's great at what he does. But for whatever reason, like the boldness of this human being so there was always like this thing of him being a student, and I'm learning these things, and I'm around artists, around creatives. But what happened is that when there was an event that he had to do the first time the brand MAXHOSA was creating an exhibition was at home. And that's why I love a lot of things about him and the brand is the ability to localize a lot of things. Where the first exhibition ever is in his hometown, when their law and this team of brand is now global, this is 2013, is already within Joburg, Cape Town, and there's no store at home, but there was a pop-up. To create that was also how people can also understand how he thinks, how the brand thinks. That very patriotic, very in the sense of who we are as African, South African, and also creatives and honoring that. So I think then our first working relationship was around that, and post that has been social media. So I've seen the brand from a digital sphere, but also seeing it through work. And I think fast track went back to school on my side, because now I'm able to, I think I've kind of understood why I need to do what I'm doing. Then went to corporate communication, strategic brand management, strategic brand communication, and honors in that. Then the brand became something that's like part of my muscle. So everything I'm doing is also on the basis of the brand. So the ability to now communicate culture is on the scientific way in which to communicate. I'm able to know those things. But the cultural resonance and relevance of brand, I understand because I've practiced it. And going back to your question of how then have we had the idea of him being the face and brains and us working as a team to push that, is that we blindly understand his vision, we blindly follow his vision because it's as clear as day to him. And our role is, it's never been a doubt. It's just to say whenever it's impossible, it's something we don't see it happening. That's the one we've seen how God's hand has come in, the ancestor's hand has come in to then say we cannot be, Drake, and that's another one you asked. So Drake line, it's too far late, and it's not the time to rest now. And I think that's the urgency at which we operate on the brand, because he's the brains, he's the structure, he's the talent and the business. And I've never, I may be biased, but I've never seen that in a flourishing sense where one doesn't dip. All these things have kept the whole. And I think our role as a team, specific my role, is to make sure that the communication doesn't dip when it comes to speaking on this. And we've got our MD, we've got our marketing team, and our role has been to herald his vision. But what I love is that with him, he's able to say, I want to put my team on the forefront, and I want to move back to them being a lot more creative and the creative direction of the brand. But to be able to put these hats is something that I marvel at every day when I see, and I'm like, well, not only is he an astute business person, he's a great talent, brilliant designer, and all-round great thinker and grounded human being. And so these, when you see it in
but also having the understanding to be able to put people in place
100%,
because that's also the bigger challenge, like,
and the risk that it poses,
being able to put structure in place, because when it's solely centered around you, it rises and falls with you. And yes, if you're able to, you're able to navigate the different spaces, but there's not enough time or energy to manage all the different spaces. There's what we're capable of doing,
100%,
and there's what we have the capacity to do.
And what also God has called us to do in the time that God has given us. So I think what I really have been enamored with was the ability of someone to say, jump. And if there's a falling, we'll catch, but just jump. And when we jump and you realize you're soaring, you're flying, the ability of someone to move back and say, okay, now let's just guide the flight this way. But it still is, I really see selflessness in human beings where they're able to allow people to propel. We consider what we have created as a brand as an institution. The people we've propelled from quote unquote this institution have gone on to become great at what they do, but also the way that we work, like the way Parisians would look at us as a production company to Paris without having to necessarily outsource that. And we bring our own. That's also an anomaly where they're like, you're not wanting, not that you're not wanting to be assisting. Going back to patriotism, we're able to say our stream will be via the team that's traveling. Our production, our choreography will be home. And in a space where that's foreign, it's in a system that doesn't allow you to do that. How do you even still say we will produce our own fashion shows in another country? We're also a blip when it comes to, that's one element of it for us to produce our own.
Often it's just the designer coming.
Yeah, you just bring your clothes and then that's it.
And then,
and
whatever week it is,
we could be happy with that because that's the structure of fashion weeks. You could definitely be happy with that.
And it'd be cheaper.
There's also that, but also the fact that there's this long play of saying, let's allow people, like I've seen from the team and how many people whose work is featured on Vogue by virtue of us being the proxy. And that alone is not lost on me, that's also in someone's credit, in someone's portfolio. And they're able to say, this is the work we've done.
And also that it's not impossible. Like, it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter where you started.
Yeah.
But you can go to the other side of the world and actually do this work.
Yeah.
Just as somebody there
100%.
does the work. Because we're used to people coming in, right? So we're used to people coming into the continent.
And giving us value.
Yeah, coming into the continent and working from here. But very rarely do we kind of leave here to go somewhere else and run things. So my wife runs events and conferences.
Yeah.
She's worked on massive conferences. And I am fascinated. I continue to be fascinated by how she can have a client in Egypt or in Ghana or in Kenya or in Rwanda, and she gets on a plane and goes there and runs an event and deals with hotels and all of that. Like, I don't have the temperament for it, right? But to watch her do it and even navigate different cultural spaces.
100%.
But she doesn't think about it anymore because she's done it so much. So I see the value in being able to take somebody from here, especially like I can imagine that first trip, like the first trip versus the third trip.
100%.
Because the first trip is probably filled with that self-doubt and anxiety and all of these things. By the third trip is like, I've done this. Like it's New York, it's Paris. Like, I've read about the place, but it's just another space. I'm going to do the work that I know.
It's muscle memory. I think I always say, and I'm saying this on a platform, maybe one day people don't indict me on it, but should I write a book, it'll probably be called Sweat Equity. And I have this title. I always say I like starting with a title in mind and I can build on it. It's how I'm built as one as a writer and as a person. But the idea of sweat equity, and it's twofold, and I like that. It's sweat equity, muscle memory. It's the idea that going back to my life and how I know what I know, but it took the education to stamp that I know what I know. Because someone seeing what I do for the brand may negate the fact that campus manager so many years ago, having done these events, having managed a jazz club, managed artists, and that's not something I come with when I have to be now communications manager or culture communications lead. Then you just give people this. But the muscle memory and the sweat equity I've built is that, working with the brand since 2013, it's not a surprise. It's like, nothing comes as going back to Drake line. Nothing really comes as a surprise anymore. It's just, you just are enamored and grateful for the opportunity. And I think that's where we're at. We understand the dynamics of things changing in our field, specifically fashion and the creative scene, the dynamics of ever evolving and moving with the times, but understanding at the core, the base is this. At the end of the day, we still are clothing our continent and exporting culture. If we understand those two things, it doesn't matter the how. It could be just one garment that people get to see for 3 hours. It could be dancers that we're bringing in. It could be a traditional artist. it could be a poet. But if the core is the same, that we just bringing our culture to the world, we stick onto that. That's where you look at the hill. Our hill is just that. If it transcends the culture, and now a Vogue will ask, give us the name of the dancers and what dances they're going to. That's a Vogue and asking about Pantsula dance. Now that's written, that's on the literary canon of what we've created. It's etched in culture forever, where they're able to say this is what happens. And and the other things that I'll speak on Paris a little bit is that the honor it is, which is also honor and responsibility, but the difficulty of the conversation, it's nuanced. Where for the past 3 years, we've been the only African brand on the official schedule. Not only South African, only African. So our mouthpieces for the continent, and the responsibility that is that through you, if these other brands are coming in, you've set the standard of success or failure. And that's already on our shoulders when we do every one of our events. And that's the difficulty of it now, going back to the human being. How do I, as little scrawny me, figure that I have to have a temperament of understanding that? And I always say pressure is a privilege, but it is an intense amount of pressure on the global scale, with 900 people coming to see a show, the esteemed media, it's the invitations, it's the back end, it's the music, it's the rights, it's the royalties, it's the dances, the trips. And also, dare I say, it's all out of pocket. And that's also the other side of it, that we've got a leader that's understood that for culture and for the conversation, I'm going to be able to, whatever you need, I will make it happen. And we can figure out how we can get assistance in the future. But for now, our train is just to keep moving and how heads down and move, because we understand that we're in a unique position as a brand and as a people. Like, even for myself, I get to be part of the team that's shaping the narrative of this cultural phenomenon that people see from the outside, but for us on the inside, we work exceptionally hard to maintain the resonance and relevance of what it's become for years.
I think two things come to mind. So I think it's interesting that you did go back to school, but going back to school knowing the gaps that existed,
100%.
having been out in the world and now being active, and kind of going, okay, I think this is where I need a bit more foundation.
Yeah.
As opposed to the way we normally do it, which is kind of
Study,
you go to
figure it
school,
out.
you study further,
And figure it out.
and then you go out into the world and kind of go, this is the foundation I have.
Yeah.
And I think we're in a world today where it needs a bit more of that. It needs a bit
100%.
more of, you're kind of active in the world, but you're finding, you're identifying the gaps.
Yeah.
And then looking at ways of filling those gaps.
And also, it's the privilege. I mean, I'd say kudos to my parents for, there's never a moment where I felt I failed or I felt I need to do something about my life. And that's difficult because now, as a young man that's growing up, that's also in relationships and other elements, you can feel it everywhere, the pressure of you have to, indoor must, but it's never been in an element, or I'd even dare say also in relationships in some elements, that there's never been a pressure for me to maintain a status quo of what society is bringing. I said basically to my parents, I want to travel as a poet. And a brilliant thing about poetry is that it saves the world, but it also saves the pocket because there is no element of financial know-how on this, and kudos to the Afro-Akans in the world. And so I come from being a student of that, traveling for 5-6 years, just arts festivals, to hear at Joburg yourself, platforms you guys have created, to see from the spiritual filling of the cup. And I've now realized how important that was, as much as this is, that we're able to work hard on these big projects, but spiritually I'm also fulfilled in the element of, I understand that it means something also means nothing. And that, had I not taken the chance of being a barefoot philosopher, I would not be able to understand how I can also understand that maybe the point of life is fulfillment of your own passions. And lo and behold, I studied, to your point, studied now with the element of world knowledge, but I'm working towards a passion. I wake up every day knowing that we're building something that's culture, and it's tangible, but it's not. It's a conversations. there's the world that's awaiting to see what it's about, to invite offers and also to decline offers of traveling the globe. It's these things that we are enamored by and saying we understand the responsibility, but we are wowed in the sense of there has to be a greater power that's empowering us to do what we do. So that for me has been a beautiful way of putting a full circle. When I'm now meeting the said creatives and artists that I've met in other lifetimes, me opening up for Tumi, in 2012 at the Gramstar Arts Festival as his only performance, as a solo artist, and me the only it was via just Massage saying, yo, there's this guy with the book, just he would like to read a poem. I was like, yeah, for sure. And then years later, it's going back, Drake line again, Years later, I'm your artist, but you can hardly remember that I was walking the hallway and being that person. So I will always remember those moments and these people. But I always say, as they see the work and what we do, or the work that I do and who I am in relation to what I've created with my career, I'm also saying, I understand what people have created with their careers. Yourself, the Bracken Zeros, to me, that's been, and I know I'm turning it around, maybe you can kindly share as to what has been the one thing that's kept you consistent in being grounded in this task, because it's a lifelong mission. You've not been doing this for 2 years.
Well,
decades.
It's an interesting one, because as you're talking about that, as you're talking about it, I don't know about other people, but as you're talking about it now, like the thing that popped into my head is, yo, man, I've just been trying to live, just been trying to live, like you don't. And I'm sure, like with hindsight, like where you're looking back over your life, you're looking, you're looking over these moments and you're making those connections, right? But when you're living them, there's no real kind of connection making, right? You're not looking at the patterns. Like you're dealing with whatever's right in front of you, and you're kind of doing best.
Yeah.
But that said, I haven't thought about it a lot, but I was raised with a particular perspective. I was raised with a particular lens. I was raised with certain values and principles, which are they're not a lot. Like my father always used to say, like we have very few principles, but we're hard and fast about them. And so that's been the compass that I've lived with, because I don't have to think about it, because it was so ingrained in me growing up. My father was born and grew up in the Gold Coast, which became Ghana. I remember being 37, 38 years old, the first time I traveled to Ghana with him, and him showing me where he was standing when Kwame Nkrumah gave the Independence Day speech, right? So I was raised with those ideals. So it becomes kind of the thread. It becomes the kind of the compass. So I don't think too much about it. Like when I was in poetry, like I wrote poetry, and I always wrote poetry.
Yeah.
And then one day I was staying in Yeoville, and I go to Doornfontein because I'm going to interview Black Sunshine, who I followed around the city because I love their stuff so much. But I wasn't working, and I hustled a gig to write an article on Black Sunshine for a publication. And Newa says, hey, we're going to be in Doornfontein at this place called Jungle Connection. So you can interview us there. And then kind of pitching up a Jungle Connection and seeing people get up on stage and share their poems. And I'm like, you can do that? And I'd been writing poems for years.
Yeah. And
then discovering the person who ran Jungle Connection, Julius Makweru. I know Julius from Lesotho. He grew up he grew up around me, or like I'm older than him, so he grew up around me, but he's somebody that I knew from Lesotho.
Yeah.
And then going, well, I write poetry and I've been writing poems for years. Let me try this thing out.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm a poet. But I had notebooks and notebooks of poetry. So yeah, I think a lot of times, maybe others are a bit more deliberate about it. Maybe others are a bit more, oh, this is what I'm doing. I move and sway. Like,
or labeling it per se.
I called myself, I decided I'd retired from poetry. It's now over a decade ago. It's like maybe 15 years ago. And people are like, oh, you can't retire from poetry. Oh, once a poet, always a poet. I was like, but one day I woke up and I said, I am a poet. Like, nobody called me a poet before that.
Yeah.
I used to get up on stage and share some stuff. But then one day I was like, do you know what? I am a poet. That's how I labeled myself to the world.
Gotcha.
So I'm like, I can label myself as retired.
Unlabel.
And I moved on to other things.
Yeah. I think it's also one of the greatest lines or two words that I've seen, and I love that. It's like the comma in between human being. It's how I've lived my entire life, that I'm a human comma being. That just that comma, going back to understanding, is just that pause allows us that this is what you are becoming, this is who you are, this is who you are becoming. Like, you don't wake up, to your point, you don't wake up and be a human because you were thrust into the world by various forces beyond yourself. But the moment you realize this is what you are becoming, it then becomes a lifelong mission unto you back on the earth, that you are being this person. And I think if there's a label that I would put on myself, is that I'm a human being, I'm a man becoming, I'm a person being personified. It helps, to your point of, I'm also on the notion of a poet never retires, but I've also done the same, but, don't want to be chastised. But the idea, because people, I think also in the sense that someone can say, then there's poetry in how you shoot the lens. And someone had to make me realize I've got 100,000 images on my phone. So it's like, you may not write, but the way you shoot is also, there's a sense of poetry, and also maybe how you live in your life, how you are fathering. Like, there's a lens, then in that lens I can understand that, but I'd rather be a human becoming. I'll be a human being, because then it's a lifelong mission that will outlive me, that through all these various iterations of myself that I've lived, and this maybe at the moment being one of them, with the most glare, with the most shine, with the most esteem and allure, if I had to move on to another one, I would have served my purpose as a human in this, first and foremost, than a career. Because I think in any careers, and as you know with your career, like, glad to see how it's like, it's not by intention, it's by purpose and also proximity. And we don't speak enough about how a lot of things are just by proximity. That had I not been back home, had I not quit school, would I be in the career that I am? Because it took me being home to meet this human being. And I'm a believer that everything that's meant to happen has happened. But in those moments, it's also how humans navigate via actions, or lack of actions, that you can propel yourself to this stage or this stage. Me going to a cafe in Rondebosch to assist with my friend who was an MC, going back to school, and there's a poetry delight happening competition, and me, I'll be the B-side. And so he, going back to the idea of me being on stage now on public platforms and touring, he then, for whatever reason, they're like, okay, no, we're looking for poetry, and what you're saying is hip hop. And you're like, yo, my friend is a poet. And I'm like, I'm just here to assist you, I'm just here to assist you. And they're like, no, just say something. And lo and behold, I'm saying something, and then fast forward, I'm now in the finale of this quote unquote TV competition in a Joburg, in a Greenside, staying at Reimsig, by virtue of the moment that I decided to say, okay, I'll say, I guess I'll say something. So, but I'm also a big believer in proximity, and I don't think we often understand as human beings that there's people that I may never meet again by virtue of met them once in maybe another country or even in South Africa. And I don't even know if that's the first and last time. And if we're not understanding how this is important. I had to make sure, is your approach, that I also honored the ability of being in your proximity, because I feel this is important to me. And for whatever reason, for future or past, that's led me here, I'm honoring that. And I think we don't get a lot of moments for people to have a presence of mind to, one, be present in moments that they have, and also honor them with understanding that this element of proximity I may never have. We see it in dating, that by virtue of you dating, you are in proximity with this person. We were both in the club. How did you meet? You know, it's proximity, but we don't understand how then the importance of going to certain spaces help, if this is what's going to define your future wife or your future mother of your children or your future self. And so I've learned that if I'm not at home, I will honor spaces that I want to intentionally go to. And I've learned that by being in proximity with my own twin, that when I realize, okay, we're both independent of each other, we don't have to be quote unquote twins with the label, I will find myself at the back of Untitled and just sit and allow for the music to be there. I'll find myself in a train from one space to another space in China and write poems that I may never put out. But the presence of mind of being in this moment is poetic in itself. So I think my honoring of, one, what you've highlighted, and also the space, is understanding that our presence is the greatest gift over and above breath, you know, because you don't even know that you are probably meant for this moment.
I mean, so there's a lot of stuff in there. But so Sizakele Marutlule, who's one of the guests, talked about, you know, what we're called human being, not human doing.
Yeah.
Right? And when you talk about presence, when you talk about being present, being, you know, the cliche now is like being mindful and being in a moment. There's so much value in that. And also recognizing that you will never know what that moment means for your life or the other person's life, but it's important to honor that moment because we don't know what that means.
Yeah.
And it could be like you're saying, a chance encounter. You know, I have learned lessons from singular chance encounters, from a brief moment. And, you know, down the line, all of a sudden you go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's why.
That was the moment.
And you may never see or interact with that person or be in that space again, which is an important thing. I mean, one of the things I'd wanted to chat to you about was how you stay, you know, kind of how you stay rooted in who you are as you're kind of navigating, because you're going out into the world 100%. And you know, you're in New York and you're in Paris Week and you're not there in a corner. Right. You're there to actually do stuff, and you know, your presence is noted.
Thank you.
But kind of understanding how you stay rooted in who you are as a individual, as a father, as a friend, as an uncle, as a brother, etc.
Got you. One of the key things, and it's, to really be honest, it's probably the most difficult task. It's how do you stay in moments without being jaded? And I think we see it often enough where you repeat the same thing often enough, it becomes a norm and it doesn't faze you. I think maybe speaking of myself, is that I'm hypersensitive where everything phases me, good, bad, and ugly. Everything shapes my ability. Hyper distracted, super sponge, hypersensitive, overly ambitious, overly communicating, lacking in decorum as to what spaces are or who people are in my life. But that, I think in the ability of understanding all of that has made me realize that I don't know if I'd consider myself grounded more than grateful. I think it's a cliche to say it, until God calls you, you don't know how much breath you have in your lungs. And I think for me, it's the ability that I look at my life in totality and and note how in any moment it could have been any other moment. It could have been me finishing a school, studying really 9 to 5, still wearing the same spectacles, different family, different child, partner, different surroundings. And I think right now I'm in a very pivotal state in my life where I understand how it's the same reason why a child would get a car and decide I need to go to Nkundla in the kraal to honor the ancestors. I think the ability of understanding this is solely not your doing. You're merely just being shaped by every atom that's been around you, by being also a vessel that was able to receive. So I think it's the ability to receive it all, and I think, and I've seen that to my friends, that when you receive the great, you also have to, in the same vein, be able to have the same grounding and focus to receive the not so great and the negative. And I think I'm in a space where, if I have to be honest, I'm Drake line again, career going great, but the rest of me is fading slowly. It's literally a line where you chronicle the height of success, but at the pinnacle of the snap of what is it that is suffering as a result of this. So my hyper focus on career may make a lot of other elements of my life not so present, unintentionally, but it's a reality. And if I'm present in that, and I'm present in understanding, right now it's tough, right now it's not a good time, I also have to be present and understand that we are honoring something beyond. I'm honoring something beyond myself. It's me being present for me that I was not present for years ago. It's me when I made a decision I'm not going to be in school anymore. And rightfully so, maybe I saw it as quitting when no one else did. That I work hard, that no one even thinks of that. That's why I'd bring it up. No one even recollects that. I'm able to meet past colleagues in the career that I've created, but they don't even consider that, oh, but you left this. Because it's now a connection to we get why you're here. But if I had not understood that then, that it still is a painful part of my life. So pain, pleasure, happiness, and sadness, if I'm able to be present in all of those, I think that's how I maybe ground myself to any moment in understanding that it's where I'm currently at. It's what I have to currently face and feel, and be ultra grateful that I'm not where I was in my thought. So I'm in my mind a lot. Serial overthinker, serial oversharer as well. But when I've realized that in my moment of silence, which you'd maybe note, you get to sit with all these thoughts, and you get to sit with, I'm able to enjoy a festival that we've produced from the lens of watching people consume it after it's done. But at the moment, I'm working hard to maintain with the team how we can build this beautiful team that people can get to. Last week, I was getting goosebumps about Paris Fashion Week, as though I was not the person who was part of the entirety of it. So I think it's the presence of mind and understand right now, I have to be present to work hard for us to maintain the status quo of being number one, for lack of a better word. And it's tough, and we have to also be honest and say right now, we perceive seen as number one, and there's no time to rest. We have to maintain this. So that's from a career side. 2, I've got a beautiful family that God gave, a brilliant child who's an artist, and I see myself in, and that's an honor that maybe God could not have given if there was a thought that you wouldn't be that. So I have to be a present father to my child. Was turning 4. He's an artist. He likes art. He's in his own mind. And I then have to realize I also pursued my art, lacking in school. So I have to also, how do I guide this human being in understanding that? There's that. Then there's a me that's just grateful to be alive and saying, we have breath. I wake up every day and say, wow, we get to do things. How do I then contextualize it? Is just going back to a human being, and gratitude is how I'm present in all these moments. There's nothing about me that makes me feel we're lucky, and I've seen the work firsthand of what has gotten us to be where we're at. There's nothing about us that makes us feel we shouldn't have, and why not us or why not me? But there's also is a responsibility, like now that it is you, you have to understand that it's not I could tell you all the countries we've been to, versus I can tell you the moments we've changed, the ability to sit with Nala, who 2 weeks back, which is a brilliant, beautiful way to chronicle the ability of understanding gratitude and having a presence of mind. We're doing our thing as a only African brand in Paris Fashion Week, and we work with various makeup artists. But Nala, when she posted that she's been in Fashion Week for 20 years as an assistant, as a backup of all these big major brands, it took an African brand for her to be a creative director of makeup and have a leadership role with 20 years in the same country as an African person from Cote d'Ivoire. And that for me made us realize that wow, is like little us with our abilities as young as we are. We have this responsibility and understand. So my success of Paris Fashion Week is that. It's understanding that, and when she posts that and shares that, and what that means to her, and how she, because we had that conversation of her saying it in front of us, and I can see the tweet and the post, and people say, "Oh, this is amazing, well done on doing this as a makeup artist." But she's able, like, being here as one, being overqualified and being in the spaces, and you can be at the back room of Balenciaga, and you can do all the makeup, lead, but from behind. And now I'm that in my leadership position and also credited as that. It changes a lot of things to her, just the validation. So how can you not then ground yourself understanding that is the moment we live for versus the notoriety of what maybe the brand has become? And this is one of many. It's traveling with the team from South Africa, KwaZulu-Natal, Joburg, East London, to stream a show. And no one would know until we highlight those things, that the team is purely South African, and you're watching to the stream where we could put the same amount of costs, even less, with the team that's there and stream it. Because why would someone care if something so unintentional as a stream? So it's us being able to make these decisions. And if the country then says this is the moment you're going to trend for, then it's like, if we're willing to take this, if this is what we know we've created. And that's, for me, is like, I'm willing to take death if it comes with the life that I've lived.
How has your son being born destabilized the idea of your life that you had? You talked a lot about career. Right? You've talked a lot about building this brand and contributing in the work that you've done. But I also know that having a child can really destabilize any type of plan or idea that we have for who we are and what we're doing 100%. And why we're doing it.
I like the ability of the destability, like, because that is the actual fact. You're never the same. I think there's 2 things. One is you cannot help but understand that there's something greater that you were meant for when you see a person you brought on this planet become versions of you and also versions of themselves. So from birth, it's probably going to be the hardest thing for me to admit, but I don't know if it's 3 or 4 years later, it still makes sense that there's a child in my life. And I think that's the destability, that yes, every single part of a muscle, and I know the idea of a presence and being a present dad, and I don't think there's ever a moment where I'll never become that. But I don't know if I've computed to myself as Ntsika to say, you are now this. And I think that's the destabilizing element, is that you just got into gear, and it's through sheer gut, will, instinct, love, care, that you're moving with this human being and building them. But at the same time, you realize you just started at zero on everything that you ever thought of. So I think even career started at zero, relationship starting at zero, life, and someone is looking at you to say, you are it. For everything that I need to do, you are it. It's how he still cries when I have to leave. And that makes me quit my career, want to quit my career and just stay at home. But understanding I need a career to build the home. But it's like, how do I sit? Then it's like, it's going to be then a Sunday where I don't do anything other than stay with this human being and be in their brain. And just, so the part of, Umi, who's, a brilliant human being. And when I look at him and I'm like, well, okay, there's two of us now, it's just the ability of understanding that, going back to God, wow, how much with the karmic laws of the universe, karma must I have gotten to be able to have this human being to shape with all they are, with all they come with, shape them with another human being, but be able to create a version of themselves that I can extract myself from and say, okay, you know what? I know my parents wanted this for me, but I don't think I'm gonna want this for you. It's in conversation and seeing that they're completely their own human being. They don't care about anything other than their toys if they want their toys, their art if they want art. And I realize also then my strong-willed personality, he's Aries, I'm also Aries, then comes from this human being that we both are a tug of war. Then the mom becomes the buffer between these two boys, that are like, this crowd that we both have to. But at the same time, there's never been something that's gotten me so soft. And I think I was saying this to my friend, the idea of mortality and the scariness of mortality immediately kicked in when I realized the child was born. Every time you realize, oh, you can die, you're gonna die. Death becomes a thing, but you now negotiate with God. One more day, 2 years. I want to see him do this. I want to see myself do this. I will not put myself in this position where I'm outside long enough for anything to happen. And it's, you travel, you're on a plane, you don't know anything can happen. You're in other countries, and the only thing, hip hop again, aka line, in the club looking at your baby pictures, and that's what you call a juxtaposition. It's literally the stability of my life. It's that for the first time, I'm uncertain of everything. Everything. There's nothing that I'm certain of when it comes to career, life, relationship. And that is one of the scariest places to be. But then I realized, going back to this thing, if you're preaching presence, you also have to be present in this. You have to, it's like this thing of going back to men, like this notion, swallow this. It's like, then I have to swallow what this has become as the bitter pill, but the beautiful pill of being a father and having someone's childhood that you're rearing, that you're building, to either see or never see. There's a chance that I may never see him be a teenager. I don't know that. That's up to God. Or there's a chance he buries me as a 99-year-old man. And in all of those, mine is then, I still have you though in this moment. Can I not appreciate this moment? Can I not appreciate you in this moment? And I think that is the toughest thing, is to be away from that. And my job, going back to career again, is to be as invested in the career as I would in his upbringing. And that has been the stability, is like, how do I work when you are on my arms? And how do I dip midnight to go back to the office and come back before you sleep? How do I take you to school and know that by the time you come back, I'm gone? It's a tough feeling to have, but it's one that I think I'm honored to at least know that God gave me the ability to have a human being that can look at me with love, pure love.
I mean, because as you know, I'm a big believer in kind of that idea of presence. My line is presence with a C as opposed to presence with a T. And I made decisions accordingly. But at the same time, I remember before I had children, reading something somewhere. It might have been like one of those catchy signs, or it might have been somewhere significant. But the idea that if, telling your children they can do whatever it is that they want to try and do, you need to show them. You can't sit on a couch and constantly say, you can be all you can be. because they just look at you sitting on the couch. But it's that balance, right? It's trying to find, not even balance, like alignment between the two things, between being there and being present, but also showing them that, look, in life, you have to go out there and you have to work and you have to do stuff.
Yeah.
You can't just sit back and things will come to you. Manifestation, I'm a believer in manifestation, but you can, do the affirmations, but you have, or you can say the affirmations, but you have to do something. Like you have to put yourself in proximity.
100%.
Like you have to prepare yourself for when the opportunity arises, be able to take advantage of it.
Yeah. On that, funny enough, on that, it's like you just hit on the I was watching this interview by Coleman Domingo, and he's like, he doesn't believe in manifesting, he believes in hard work. And someone in the comments, and I was reading the comments, some of the comments like, but you're missing the point, is that manifestation in itself is a precursor to hard work. It's not saying something, it's I always say people believe in the Bible. If God says let there be light, it's not just the voice and light, it's the miracles that happen thereafter, it's the work that happened thereafter to build. I shall now call you man, or I shall call you woman. It's manifesting something. I always say this thing of dreams, and people speaking of dreams, going into that, to derail a bit, it's that I've had to say things and speak things into existence longer before they happen. And I have to work really hard to making sure they happen. It's a Paris Fashion Week that invites you to apply, that you don't just apply. That as we stand as quote unquote the only African brand in the 3 years, be it many more brands will come, no one is going to account for the years of rejection that in applying for the same thing. And when they say, yes, you can eventually, you've readied itself up for all these things. But at the pinnacle of us starting in fashion through the SA Fashion Week, the AFIs, and we say we want to do our own thing. It wasn't us complaining that the platforms, we've outgrown them or we've reached the ceiling, is to say we now have to work hard to get there. And so going back to manifestation, I'm a big believer in manifesting, but I think there's going back to my branding brain again, there's certain things that are branded in a way that media, we had a chat about media again, they branded in a way that people have given them just the name and not what they've become. Because I think that one person that's praying, you can just take me out of this situation, God, then I will become a man. That's also manifesting. I was saying to a colleague of mine, and also a friend, that if you believe in the Bible, going back to the idea of manifestation, if God is made in your own image, and some would call it almost blasphemous, that then you are in itself, in God's image, God. And so if you are praying, and this is how I envision it, there's a mirror that says, you're saying this thing. So how I envision prayer to be is you saying things to yourself. It's not saying them to, yes, there's also that from a higher level, a higher power, but at the core is, may I please be well today. May I get better. I'm in this hospital, but by the virtue of you, God, I will get out. And I'm praying to someone that I see there as myself. It's me also manifesting and putting things out in the universe to say, then I will say this. And by virtue of waking up and say, Amen, it's you saying now, let it be done. The doing part is what people forget when it comes to manifesting, and let your will be done. It's now, I'm putting it out in this universe, but I'm also saying, as you will, if it be from you, take this cup away from me. I do not want this responsibility, but if it is your will, so shall it be done. And this is someone who's giving in to say, let them do what they need to do with my body. I'm not fighting it anymore. So I think we don't put enough onus on words and actions, and how these two entities also have spirits behind them. When you say something, there's a spirit behind them. When you're doing something, there's a spirit behind it. And I think language, and dare I say, the beautiful language that we speak today, English, has killed the spirituality of certain things.
Yeah. Look, I agree. I also think that we've, in a weird way, narrowed everything So we've narrowed everything down. We've narrowed language down. We've made it very binary, very either or. We have simplified it to the point where we lose sight of all of that. Right? And English as a language, I believe, I've done some reading on this, but English as a language is so pervasive because of its simplicity, and therefore its ability to, for people from disparate spaces to be able to communicate using that language. Like most other languages have a richness that English doesn't have. But sometimes we've made everything very literal.
Yeah.
And so, when we talk about, like you said, we're talking about kind of media.
Yeah.
And I was saying 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I was in magazine, and you put out a tweet with a link to an article, and people argue with you on the basis of the article, of the caption.
Yeah.
As opposed to going in to read the article. So I'd have somebody say, yeah, but X, Y, Z. And I'm like, but if you read the article, we agree with you. We're not saying anything that contradicts.
Yeah.
It just happens that we only have a certain number of characters.
Yeah.
So we're trying to encourage you to click on the link to go read the fuller thing.
100%.
And then let's engage on that. And so, the conversations and the discussions tend to be on the simpler and the narrower perspectives, as opposed to the broader perspectives. And what you just described, I used to see, and I still kind of occasionally see, a tarot card reader.
Yeah.
And I've been seeing her for 20 plus years. And people would say to me, and, I've never been part of organized religion. I've never followed any type of organized religion. And people say to me, is this person predicting the future? And I'm like, how it was framed to me and how I therefore, the space I found for myself within it was, the person and the cards are acting as a conduit between myself and my higher self, because I struggle to connect, because of life, like imagination, creativity, all of those things get educated out of us at some stage, right?
Sure.
So all they're doing is they're serving as a conduit between myself and myself.
Yeah.
Which is, for me, when you're talking about it, it's exactly that, right? And somebody else may frame it in a total different way.
100%.
And the important thing is, does it work? Does it work for you? Like, I grew up surrounded by Catholics.
Catholic school.
And my wife is Catholic. And I've never followed, like I said, organized religion. I have respect for all religions. So I've always been like, because I wasn't raised in a particular religion, I'm kind of like, you do what works for you.
Gotcha.
As long as it doesn't create conflict between us. If it works for you, great. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you why you should actually follow that one.
Yeah.
It's like, no. I figure you will do and you'll follow what works for you. And as long as it's not destructive, as long as it doesn't create confrontation between the two of us. And I've had people around me of all religions. And because I'm never going to be here arguing about what you believe, the tenets of what you believe, I tend to have peace.
Gotcha. I mean, I'm on the other side of that. I think my father, as an expert of religious studies, I've seen and been surrounded since I was born with all religions. Methodist is the church, I'd say, that's framed my household. But my grandmother would be apostolistic, and then then going to also Catholic school. There's all these, to your point, tenets of all these subsets of religion. But going back to also finding my own purpose is that the way then becomes less important if you understand that it's leading to one road. And I think we focus so much on the potholes in this road versus, we're going to the same place. And I think ultimately, if we all human beings believe that we all will go to the same place of, be it in our own mind, in the sky, in the ground. If that is then the road becomes less important. I think I've seen that of just the analogy of life. How we get to the end of life is not as important as how we live our lives. And I think we're so concerned, and I guess from a religious side as well, there's a concern is how do we get to do this, where in the confines of a church I can have that, and the person is not the closest to that road that's going to where we're all going to, but we're all in this house. So I've learned that maybe in life you have to be, and I guess also is from a writer's perspective, you have to also maybe a little bit of a fly in the wall of your own life so that you can guide your life, but you also live it. And I think it's the ability of someone that I guess is also the poet in me, that through strife and pain, you're able to also clock in your mind that this is great content. It's the duality of human beings that you're able to say, I'm going through the hardest thing right now in my life, but let me not forget to write it down. It's the reason why we love the music. There's soundtracks to our lives that people had to, in their abilities, find another power or a higher self or a sense of self to then say, I also need to chronicle what this moment is, maybe for other human being or maybe for myself, put it out in the world and other people relate. Same in fashion. I believe that's what we've done in culture, where we export culture, and had someone not taken an element of their cultural norms and their own practice and say, I think I want to chronicle this in my own creatively, there would have been no resonance. And now globally there's that. So to your point, we often lack a sense of self when we have to be present in anything. I've seen how through escapism, through all these facets we speak on media, that we don't have enough people, and I'd say people in media, I won't give them the career titles of journalists, to also be human beings in the media space, because it's the old adage of doctors do no harm. I believe it's the same for any career specialist, that at the core of it, do no harm. If this is what I'm going to tell in a way to now allow people, tarot card, to lay all the cards on the table and for people to pick up, because you still are also actively picking up the cards. So if you're reading articles in media, we're still picking up the cues. We can form our own opinion. Then I think that's where the lack in humanity and humans, that we already are gearing through a title. They already will gear to say, this is what happens. And then the title is already given away without, it's maybe drawing people onto the article, but it's already drawn people out of the article by saying, oh, this is a title, then I already know what this is about. Let me make my comments on the title. So I believe Sake is a beautiful word that she says, going back to one of my beautiful songs, Ngowe, that she has, nothing is a waste. And that line is something that I've lived with for as long as I've also known that song, before that song and the way after. That all of it matters. The fact that I could, be trolling matters. That I could be an earnest human being matters. Evil matters. Nothing is a waste, because if the idea that we're going to this part and that's the part we have to go to, then this is not a waste. If I have to, quote unquote, kiss many frogs to get to the princess or the prince, then, this is not a waste. But we've seen through media, social media, that we're now going to shame the kisses. We're going to shame the kisses, even though if it's led me to this. Because in society, we know how to term this person who's kissed frogs, or this person who's committed these crimes, to be able to say, I was that. They have titles. And so I think if we become human beings or human becomings, then none of it is a waste. Then you know that it was a journey. Me, quote unquote, quitting school, I'd even dare say quitting, I'd say letting school go to pursue a walk of life and come back to school with life. And, then you're breezing through school now, because you literally know, it's like now my lecturers are one of my closest friends at this other side, because now there was an element of engagement. There was an element of honesty. There's an element of respect, and also the element of responsibility. I'm able to, this is what you're doing. I exercise what you were saying. I'm arguing it didn't work on this and this and this. And I don't think as media practitioners, and I also would consider myself that, we would have enough of these conversations without it being led to what the destination is, other than who are you, let's try and get to know you.
What's exciting you now?
Oof. Giving it a thought. I'll try and put it as a list. My child growing up, that's one of the most exciting things, scary and exciting, because, you know, the walking in the door after a long travel, that's nothing. And then, you know, we just can go for ice cream. There's no attachment yet to financial means. I'm not where you at, where someone said to me, it's a please know and how to be present for these years where they cannot name something that they want. They cannot take it. They're not aware of the cost of what it is. And you can just give them a pink shirt and that's what you'll see them as, and they can enjoy it, you know, and they don't have to take it off. So that's exciting. The unbecoming of who I am is exciting in all facets. I think I'm in a very, very tough space in my life where career-wise, I think I'm aware of what it's becoming. As I grow, it's exciting, but also scary, because now I know the certainty of certain things. If I lose friends, I know the certainty of this then becomes there's no coming back in this, because I'm in the age where you can't draw back certain things. If I lose an element of relationships, there's no youth that can say, oh no, we were trialing it out, or it was a space. The certainty of things is scary, but I think I'm excited of the becoming the me I envision myself to be. Music for me is very exciting as well, that we're able to discuss bars, we're able to discuss lyrics, we're able to discuss artists creating their own festivals. When we used to be fans of them, I'm able to call the artists that I enjoyed their music and have questions about this, you know, and be able to, so music is exciting, because also from a fashion lens, without music, we don't have a narrative of our shows. I was even saying to the team, going back to the idea of language, our show starts with a whistle. And that whistle is literally a geolocator of South Africa. Iflate, Ikwelo, like it's not a, it's literally that. And with that for me is also exciting for us to be able to frame that, and I'm able to go to a journalist and be able to frame what that narrative is. Iflate versus Ikwelo versus a whistle, dog whistle, like just the various elements of language through just non-verbal elements, that's exciting. Music is exciting for me because of what it does. When a friend was like, I would love to see people's playlist when they are in certain moments of pressure. Is it, rock music? Is it calm? What happens with this? So that's exciting. The things that I want to do are exciting. I think I want to eventually get into a space where, from a communication space, create a new narrative around how creatives communicate. That's exciting. Being able to lead a team is exciting. I've got young minds that passionate, they care. And for them to look at me as someone who's leading them, that's exciting. And dare I say, life is exciting in the sense of, I know right now, the panic is, we're literally producing a festival that'll happen maybe after the episode is done. But after that, I'm able to just go home and just be at the beach. So I'm already planning. I can't wait, and with the team, we're talking about how, we can't wait when someone's taking this leave. Like, I'm taking 2 weeks, 3 days. But that's exciting because they're still in the work. And I think the exciting elements of people to find the joys in after the work. And they're still in the work. And they're still doing the work. And they're still fulfilling the work. That's exciting. Art is also exciting for me. I'm a big fan of art, close and also from a distance, because I've seen how all of us are painting our own brushstrokes through life. I think if in a nutshell, but I've got probably 200 lists of things that excite me. But waking up, I'm excited. I can't wait to see what are the challenges. And with everything that's not going great, I think I'm excited as to how do you turn that around? Because I think I've lived a life of being able to turn things around for myself. Perceptions, perspectives, as well as reputation, for lack of a better word. Like me seeing, going back to when I was a poet and someone, I remember a client coming to me, coming from a brand, and they're like, this is the guy that used to make us cry. I was like, I don't know if I'm the same human being. And they chronicling to my team who have no knowledge of who this person was. No, he was this and he did this in college. And I'm like, oh, it's exciting to see that I've also lived that life and going back to a point of quote unquote retired. But now that I've moved this life, it's still copywriting, still writing. It's still poetic in a sense, but for people to think that you held a youth, and you also was a youth that was growing up and figuring things out. But through your writing, you kind of chronicled parts of what they were feeling. And that's why maybe music resonates deeper for me. It's not just music, it's not just lyrics. I understand the other side of it. I understand the lived experiences because I see it as there's this poem that this lady says, and I'm probably going to butcher it. They're talking about how in life it's not the spectators who win, it's those who've been marred with the sweat, blood, and tears, who've been in the gauntlet, who've been at the test of fire, who are heroic in their elements. And that's how I see my career, is that I'm able to see fellow, warriors in all the facets of the careers I've lived, in all the facets of my lives I've lived, with the poets that I used to be on stage with the students I studied with the colleagues that I'm at work with the creatives that I've partnered with. You see these warriors in this gauntlet, and we are all fighting this system. And when I see that, that's what excites me, that as the gaze of any other media layers can see or truncate what we're doing to a moment or viral moment in this, and we're like, you don't even see what we've created. And that's exciting, because when they do, it'll probably be 30 years and they maybe go back to this like, oh, actually, we were not even aware. We were not even aware as to how much intentionality they have. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about what the future prospects of our careers are going to become.
Thank you very much, man.
Appreciate it, brother.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. Please leave a review and subscribe. Check out the show notes for links to the guest, the podcast, and myself. I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed having it.